wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
You're listening to A Quirky Journey, the healthy family podcast with your hosts Jo Whitten and Fouad Kassab. Welcome to A Quirky Journey. We're really excited today to have with us Leslie, who is the brains behind the Mind Foundation and the heart behind it. So today, Leslie's going to give us a bit of a background on what she does with the Mind Foundation and how the Mind Forum started. And we've got lots of questions for you, Leslie. So welcome.
Good morning. Thanks, Jo and Fouad. I'm very thrilled to be here.
Thanks so Leslie. Much for joining us. Hi, Fouad.
Good morning.
So would you like to just start with a little bit of your story and explain to us how this Mind Foundation became what it is and why you started it? Because it's become quite a big thing, really. I've been hearing about it for a few years, and it's helped a lot of people, and we'd love to know how it all began.
Well, sure, I'd love to share my story. I think it's us parents getting out there and sharing our stories, it's really helping spread information that in the past was so difficult to find. My journey started really 18 years ago. I've got an 18-year-old who's in uni and doing very well, and a 16-year-old in high school and also doing very well. Okay. But about 15 years ago, their teacher pulled me aside and said, look, I think you should take them to see a speech therapist and an occupational therapist. Well, I was a young mom, and it was all new to me, so I took their advice, but I hadn't really noticed anything. And sure enough, my one daughter was diagnosed with dyspraxia. Okay. And I was lucky enough to go to a speech therapist who at the time recommended the only biomedical or nutritional pediatrician in all of Australia.
Oh, you were lucky.
And so I was very lucky. And I took her to see him, and that was my toddler, and I had a baby in tow with a bloated tummy and cradle cap and some eczema. And long story short, this pediatrician began to talk about leaky gut and food sensitivities and put together all the pieces that we now know about brain immunogut conditions. And so I was very fortunate to take my children off gluten and dairy and saw big results. I put them on some simple supplements, zinc, magnesium, B6, and saw great results as well. And I have to say that, the GPs that I went to were not receptive. They felt that it could, in fact, maybe be harmful. And so I was sharing my information in mothers groups and quite surprised that there were so many other kids who had similar symptoms. And, the moms would call and say, look, I can't get into this pediatrician. Is there anyone else to recommend? And at the time, there was a very short list of practitioners who understood this space. I went over to the States to a few conferences just to gain more knowledge, for my children. And I connected with a group there called Defeat Autism Now. Now, neither of my children were on the spectrum or diagnosed with autism or Asperger's. But these doctors in the States who had formed quite a significant group, there were maybe about 50 or 60 of them who were, global. They were forming think tanks and looking into this connection between the brain, the immune system, and the gut. And I learned so much from those conferences. It was like it would be a 3-day conference, and they'd have a room going for parents and a room going for practitioners. And so I just spur of the moment went up to the stage after a lecture, and I asked 2 of them to come to speak in Sydney, and without hesitation, they both accepted.
Wow.
There was no money discussed, or they are really very dedicated professionals, practitioners, pediatricians, in fact, who see the health crisis in our kids and are really just feel a moral imperative to get out there and help educate. So this was in 2005. In 2006, we ran our first Mind Forum, which was a big success. We didn't even have to market very hard. We got lots of practitioners and families, and everyone was incredibly grateful. And we had 2 streams going, one training practitioners and another educating families and teachers and speech therapists and OTs and, the whole group, behavioral therapy as well. And from there, we just kind of just kept getting calls. And my children are actually quite young. I hadn't intended to start anything very organized at the time. Because of the demand, we just did. And I worked, for free for 7 or 8 years out of my basement in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. While getting my kids to school and feeding them and getting the lunch boxes. And, it was a difficult time in that people still didn't really know about leaky gut or, even Natasha Campbell Mcbride. But it was growing. So in 2006, when we ran that conference, the pediatricians that came from the group, the Defeat Autism Now, were Doctors Nancy O'Hara and Liz Mumper. And in fact, they're coming out this year to speak again at the conference, and we're feeling really so grateful. Yeah, they've been so loyal to Australia and really globally. So they'll be coming out. And that same year, the first year, we brought out Natasha Campbell Mcbride, who had written a book called GAPS, Gut and Psychology Syndrome. Well, her book, we distributed it. We were the only group distributing it at the time. And it sold like hotcakes. And, she developed quite a strong following because she herself is a mom as well as a neurologist. And with nutrition, she healed her son off the autism spectrum and is an incredibly passionate and articulate speaker. So she's developed a strong following, as you know. And Joe, I think, you might jump in and say something about how you feel about that.
Yeah, well, it's made such a difference in our family, and I just see so many other people being helped by it. She's had a very big impact worldwide, really. And so it's great that you got her over to Australia all those years ago. I wish I hadn't missed out on hearing her speak last year, but maybe she'll come again.
She'll come again. She's loyal as well. I mean, we were lucky enough to get her back again last year. And she, this time around, she had a big following. So it's become easier. Our mission at Mind Foundation, the first priority is to help reverse the childhood disease trends, which are really alarming. If you look at the statistics, we've got 1 in 4 young Australians with a mental health condition, 1 in 3 with allergies, 1 in 4 with asthma, 1 in 10 with ADHD, and 1 in 63 with autism. Wow. And the childhood cancer, diabetes, obesity, and depression have all more than doubled in the past decade. Wow. So we're looking at very alarming statistics. So Mind's mission really is to help reverse these. And the very good news is that what we're seeing, what these integrative practitioners are seeing, is that these children are affected more by environmental factors than genetic ones, which means there's a lot that can be done to treat them, and that's really the silver lining.
And that gives parents hope, because for so long, I know I always thought it was genetic, and there wasn't. I always heard, I should say, that it was genetic and that there wasn't much you could do about it. But deep down, I kept thinking, no, there's got to be things that you can do with food. There's got to be environmental factors. And it's so good to hear it's getting out there and people are actually seeing changes in their families with changing the environmental factors.
Absolutely. One of our very popular streams that we run seminars as well as in the conference, and you'll be presenting, both you and Fouad, in a couple of weeks, is the seminar we call Food is Medicine. Yeah. And we feel quite passionate about getting at the fact that food isn't just preventative. We like to, a lot of GPs are now saying, yes, it's good prevention, but truly food is a treatment protocol. Yes. And the practitioners that we work with who specialize in special diets are expert in identifying what diet and what foods work for which individual. Yeah. And that's why our first piece of advice is really get to an integrative practitioner who specializes in nutrition, let them run the tests and help you understand what works for you, because as you know, Joe, with 4 children, one of your children might do just fine with bananas, but the other might react. Yes. And the wonderful thing is, as you begin to heal the gut by eliminating those foods that are problematic, you reduce inflammation. And if you heal the gut and balance the microbes, then you do become more robust and able to handle a range of foods. Yeah. I don't think any of our practitioners would ever say run out and buy dairy and wheat, but because those are problematic proteins for everyone. But, it's exciting to see that there are so many solutions and that, people like you are really helping get the word out. I think it's encouraging that the internet has really helped us moms and dads get out there with important information.
That's right. So, Fouad, do you have a question there?
Oh yeah, I was just thinking, like, Leslie, you've sort of been on this journey for such a long time, and you've really been at the forefront of it in Australia, and now that's really seems to be, like, for all of us, that the way forward is to heal the gut and to look at inflammation as the source of all these kinds of issues. But I'm just wondering, how have you seen the thinking evolved over the past few years, since you've started, and have you seen, like, more of a reinforcement of this, or are we seeing more things starting to come into the fold, and are we trying to address more than just food these days? Is there more stuff that's coming into the mix in terms of managing these kinds of illnesses?
Yes, I mean, that's a very good question. I've been attending a lot of practitioner conferences, and, the resounding theme is really about the immune system being taxed by what we call an overload. And that will then create inflammation and oxidative stress and lead to lots of different conditions that can affect the immune system, the gut, the metabolism. And so really it's a story of our environment. We're ecological creatures, and we evolved in tandem with nature. And in the past maybe 4 generations, we've really become out of sync with that. And, the primary culprit would be processed foods. However, there are other factors that actually infiltrate the food system, and a big one would be pesticides in our foods. One of the reasons that we are seeing so much wheat sensitivity does have to do with the way they're treating the crops, wheat and soy and corn. In America, 85% of those crops are sprayed heavily with Roundup or glyphosate. And on our board is an MIT professor, Stephanie Seneff, who's done a lot of important research to show how Roundup, which now we're ingesting because it's sprayed so heavily on the crops, how that damages gut flora. So, that is one example of an environmental assault that's hurting our bodies. There's also fluoride and chlorine in the water. And then there are factors like not enough breastfeeding and cesareans that impact on the health of the gut flora. So, to answer your question about have I seen an evolution, absolutely, and that's really encouraging. There's now so much more data coming out it's science, and so you can't refute it. And there are many more conferences around gut health, and I think gastroenterologists may begin to actually study the microbiome, which, funnily enough, they didn't learn in med school. So there's the whole, the understanding of the microbiome and the fact that we're actually more microbes than we are cells. We're about 70 trillion cells, a human being, but we're 700 trillion cells of the microbes. So microbes really outnumber our human cells 100 to 1, and or rather 10 to 1. So I think medical science is in for a huge paradigm shift now that we understand, this connection. We as microbes are connected to our earth and the water and the air and the soil. And when there's a disconnect, we become ill. Illness is a sign to change. So it's about understanding how that impacts on our environment.
So Leslie, have you personally seen any improvement in your own health since you started this journey? So I'm guessing that you're also implementing the same changes that you did for your children in terms of what you eat and the way that you live now. Have you seen any changes for yourself?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because one of our key campaigns is to really help support the mother's health and women's health in general. Look, I started with my children, and there were probably a number of years when I was an adrenaline junkie, and I was focused on getting my children to a lot of different practitioners while running conferences. And I, had my own little health episodes, and my doctor, said, look, it's time to put the mask on and help the mom. So I did step aside and, paid a little bit more attention to my health, which was essential for everyone. It's so important for our families and really our communities to ensure that the women and the mums are healthy, both prenatally and also when you've got your children and you've got to look after them. So a lot of our practitioners are very passionate about making sure they're treating the whole family. They often see the children, but they insist that the mum come in and they work her up, sometimes even before the kids, because if the mum's not well, you don't always get the compliance, the lifestyle and diet compliance you need.
That's true.
What worked for me, Fouad, was the gut. It's healing the gut. This is a story, as Natasha Campbell Mcbride so aptly explains, about maternal transfer. We inherit genetics from our parents, but more importantly, from our mothers, we inherit some key conditions, including infections, toxins, nutritional deficiencies, and the gut flora. So, I come from quite a large family. I've got 7 aunts and uncles on my mother's side and 6 on my dad's.
Wow.
On my mother's side, there was a history of a lot of kind of brain gut issues. And so, the story would have been that my mom went through my grandmom's birth canal and she inherited a lot of allergies. I went through my mom's birth canal, and I in turn inherited allergies and, what has been termed chronic fatigue. And my children also inherited, gut flora going down the generations. And each successive generation, combined with all the environmental factors, we are really eroding the health of our microbiome and the gut flora. So a generation ago, when you and I had a lolly, well, it was okay. We might have gotten a little fidgety. But nowadays, with the microbiome being that much more degraded, those same lollies really set our kids off. So it's kind of the double whammy of we're losing our immune and our robust immune system in our gut at the same time that we're being taxed with more outside toxins.
Yeah. So, definitely a double whammy. So I've seen...
So Leslie, sorry, so many questions for me.
You go.
Sorry, Joe. From my personal philosophy in life seems to be leading me down this path where I'm going back more and more into nature. There's like a caveman in me that's sort of screaming out to be always in the sunlight all the time, sleeping when the sun goes down, really trying to seek the best quality water that I can find, if sort of natural spring water that I can find, and foraging for food and things like that. And that kind of was the journey that I've gone through, from being just an office person who was obese and unwell, and I had all sorts of health problems. And now I'm at this point in my life where just having switched to an ancestral diet, it's led me down this rabbit hole. And I feel that is a place for me where true healing comes from. And I'm kind of wondering whether this kind of thing is where you're seeing happening in the mind form as well. Is there some kind of a global movement that's sort of focusing on a return to nature and eating as close as possible to what nature provided? And is there any kind of crossover between the paleo kind of diet and what you're seeing the practitioners who are coming to the mind forum talking about, and your own personal experience?
Absolutely, 100%. And what's so exciting is there's so many different groups coming together under that umbrella. Whether you call it ecological medicine, which is, in the 70s and 80s, what some of the older nutritional doctors called it, or biomedicine or functional medicine, or paleo, or GAPS. All these groups are coming together with the understanding that we need to get back to doing things that our bodies evolved to need. And that does include, being in rhythm with sleep rhythms that are in sync with the sun. And exercise. Exercise is actually extremely important. So at the conference, we do have a number of different speakers, all certified practitioners, who cover everything from nutrition to sleep, to breathing, to exercise, and even, lifestyle. We're also, tribal creatures. We need our community and we need relationship, and we actually need interaction and touch. So, the forum really tries to bring together all of these different disciplines with the evidence-based science behind it, because unfortunately we live in an environment now where we've got to prove everything under this kind of construct that's been described as science. Now, what we're finding,
we have to justify our own nature.
We have to justify what our ancestors knew instinctively and always did.
Absolutely. It's kind of evolutionary science. So, we're now at least seeing the science that supports what, I'm big on the mother's intuition, what we moms intuitively have thought for so long about what our children need, and dads as well. And it's just very exciting to see so many different groups coming together. And I think the internet has really helped that. As an example, we all know we're up against big food and big pharma who have, an interest not so much in our health, but in their sales. That's just that's the structure. Yeah. I mean, excitingly, there are lots of wonderful companies cropping up that are providing good, healthy products. So we're not just about going after business. We're pro-business, but we're pro-business that's going to provide solutions to the consumer that are sustainable. We're at the conference. We also have a big expo that promotes a lot of personal, nutritional, and healthy home products that have been vetted by practitioners. And really part of the prescription, you go to an integrative practitioner and they tell you to make sure you've got a water filter and that your air is clean and so forth. So, it's exciting to see so many people coming together. I guess what I wanted to say about one of our key speakers, Dr. Kelly Brogan, who's a holistic women's psychiatrist in New York, she's coming out and speaking at the conference, and we're very excited. Just in the past 2 months, she's skyrocketed to the top of the New York Times bestseller list with a book called A Mind of Your Own. And she basically, the subtitle is What Women Can Do About Depression That Big Pharma Cannot.
Oh, I love it.
So this younger breed of integrative doctor is on the front foot, and they're going for it because she's got all the evidence behind it, and she's got a whole book on how to treat depression without any drugs at all. And she's explaining that depression is simply a symptom. There used to be this shame around mental health issues like anxiety and depression. Well, research shows that nearly 50% of Aussie women are struggling with that, and there's no shame in it. In fact, it's a symptom of more underlying conditions that we need to get a handle on. So Dr. Brogan will be covering that, and she'll be educating families as well as training practitioners. So we encourage people to send your GPs along, because that's where the solutions will be.
We're looking forward to interviewing her on the next podcast next week, so that'll be very exciting.
So, Leslie, can you tell us a bit more about the speakers at this year's forum and who's coming and what we are to expect?
Sure. Well, I guess we should start off with our Food as Medicine stream. We've got Joe Witten and Fouad who are going to
I love those guys. They're the best.
They're the best. The star of the show is going to be Isaac Witten.
Yay!
Joe's 14-year-old son's going to be up on stage helping to do a cooking demo and explaining how nutrition really helped alleviate his symptoms of anxiety. So we're very excited about that. So that whole day, we've got Alex Stewart, who also, is leading a strong internet group. We have a holistic psychiatrist that we're beaming in from San Francisco, Dr. Suruchi Chandra, who is brilliant. She's got a degree from Harvard, a medical degree from Yale, and then she went on and practiced psychiatry, but was really disillusioned because she found that a lot of what she was treating was actually infections, because there's that brain-gut connection. A lot of infections drive mental health issues. So she went back and studied 3 years of herbs and is treating a lot of really difficult mental health issues like bipolar, schizophrenia, by treating infections with herbs and getting really great results. So that's an interesting speaker. We've also got Erica Pearson, who is a naturopath from Portland, Oregon, who's a mother of a child with Down syndrome. And she's very passionate about women prenatally making sure they've got good thyroid health, because there's a strong connection between thyroid disease, hypothyroidism, and children with developmental delay, including autism and Down syndrome. And a lot of our kids have thyroid issues too, so it's extremely important to understand how infections and toxins are impacting on that. It's not just a question of taking a hormone replacement, it's getting to the underlying conditions that affect thyroid. And who else do we have? The two pediatricians, Dr. Nancy O'Hare and Liz Mumper, I'm really fond of, because we wouldn't be here without them. So they'll be speaking to a range of issues, including how the gut impacts on the immune system and the brain. And Dr. Mumper is going to be covering maternal transfer in more detail. You know, what exactly is passing from mother to child, and how can we prevent that and treat it?
Wow, it's going to be so interesting.
Leslie, maybe a bit of a look into the future. Like, what do you see happening over the next 10 years in this movement and globally? Like, I can imagine you've seen a lot of skepticism at first. People, like, you know, from what I remember, 10 years ago, food and health were completely unrelated in terms of how people, like, in the mainstream media were looking at it. And now there's more of an uptake. And you've obviously seen that happen. And what do you see the next 10 years looking like?
Well, I see the grassroots movement driving change, which is very exciting. You know, the doctors in the medical mainstream, they really had good intentions when they went to medical school, but I think maybe some of them are scratching their heads now, wondering why they only had one course of nutrition in all those 4 years. So I think a big part of it is going to be, we'll see a shift in medical curriculum, which will help a lot of families who, they do blindly trust the medical experts. I think there are a lot of us who have had our stops and starts, and now we trust the nutritionally focused medical experts. So I think there's going to be a shift in medical education for the better towards nutrition. I think more and more families are going to start making the right decisions in terms of nutrition and lifestyle and healthy home and clean living and connecting with nature. And, as we educate and we start to make those decisions, then we as consumers will be buying the products that are good for us. And in turn, that's very exciting, because those products are also good for the planet. So, if we continue to educate and we act on what really is healthful for us, I think we'll address global warming in a much more significant way than getting out there and trying to save the planet. And in fact, I think it's hubris for us to think that we should go save the planet, because, it will spit us out before you can say boo. The bigger challenge, really, I think, the human health crisis is perhaps, more alarming than the global one, which I'm not saying that, I'm not, I'm just ranting and raving. I've been hearing this from health experts who have worked with the World Health Organization. So it's just not a campaign that's gotten out there so much, but truly our human, health is really at risk, and it starts with the gut and the microbiome. So I'm quite optimistic that we're going to continue to tell our stories, and that we're going to motivate our children to get out there and advocate for the right products and lifestyle for them, and that we'll just see a really healthy shift for human health and planet health.
Yeah, I definitely see with my readers the shift happening. I think even 5 years ago, people that I spoke to, like on my Facebook page and emails and things, they were so much at the beginning of the journey. They were, I was meeting people who had no idea that sugar was bad for you and all of that kind of thing. It was just all so new. But I think now it's really much more common to know the basics of good health and what we should be doing. And people are wanting to get back to that old way of living, the traditional ways of living. I hear people who are like business people with TV shows and all sorts of things saying to me, I just want to go live in the country and have a garden and grow food and have chickens. And I just think it's in us, and we know deep down that that's the way we should be living, that simple life with a healthy environment and in nature and eating real food. And when we get back to that, we're happy. It just helps so much.
I think we all need to move up and be neighbors with you, Joe.
Sure, you're welcome.
I spent a week there, Leslie, and I calmed down so much. Like, I didn't even know myself by the end of it, which was pretty amazing. But
Yeah.
to your point, Joe, like, there's this idea that keeps coming around in my head, and like we see all these things kind of relating back to this divorce from nature, and all these diseases and anxiety and depression, all that kind of stuff is the same symptoms that we see in domesticated animals and zoo animals. And this kind of domesticated human is living a very unnatural life, and in return, when you start eating more like a person is supposed to be, then you start going down this whole rabbit hole,
I think
one
that's
thing
what
after
it is.
the other. And eventually, like you just want to get a house in the countryside and put your hands in the dirt every day, and that's sort of like where I'm hoping like it'll kind of provide this kind of amazing world where we're all connected back to the planet again, and we find our own health in the health of the planet, and vice versa. So this is sort of my dream, and I'm really excited to see mine sort of pushing down that path, because I see a huge intersection with that, and I feel that the grassroots movement is where we need to be. Like, we have all these really huge names in like the paleo world or the ancestral health movement, and but it's all happening at the grassroots, as Leslie was saying. So Leslie, how many attendees will be at Mind this year?
Well, I mean, traditionally we get about 600. I think we're on track for about that many, and sort of 250 practitioners, which is really exciting, because that's just exponential. You know, they go out across the country and they help, sort of hundreds and thousands of patients. So we're quite excited about that. And then next year we're going to be going online with it. So, stay tuned. We are a charity. We're working on fundraising all the time. And our big vision really is just to put a lot more online so that more families can access it. But having said that, there is nothing like getting human beings in a room. So we'll always have a big conference, because I know, as a mom traveling from Australia to the States, going to that conference, it was sitting in the room with other women who had already tried it, and dads, and it was sitting and talking to a human being that actually inspired me to get grains out of our diet. I had done gluten-free and wheat-free, but I hadn't tried GAPS. And then when I tried that, I just saw a whole nother level of health. So it is important that we connect as human beings.
I think it's very powerful to also be amongst other people who are on the same journey and sharing with them. And it just gives you a whole lot more energy to try new things, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's inspiring. We all need our tribes, don't we? And it's wonderful to have our tribe, online at 6 a.m, but it's really lovely to get a hug from them too.
Yes, definitely. Not quite the same online.
We need to mix our biome as well.
Yes, there we go. Did we talk about the kind of things that are going to be in the second and third day of the Mind Forum? Because we talked about the food is medicine, but I'm not sure if we mentioned in detail what sort of things are on the schedule.
Okay, let me see. I don't have a schedule in front of me, but we'll have, we do have someone speaking on the benefits of chiropractic, which again is a modality that I have found very helpful for my children.
Me too.
And there's a research which shows that just simple adjustments absolutely impact on brain development and health. So we're very passionate about helping families understand there are a lot of natural and neurotherapies out there which are really helpful and holistic. We also have another chiropractor speaking on the importance of the vagus nerve and how the vagus nerve actually ties into the gut, and why it's important to have a healthy vagus nerve. We've got a super uber athlete called Kira Sutherland who used to teach at Nature Care. She competes in the Iron Women competitions, and she goes between Australia, her native country, and Canada. She's coming out, and she's just going to speak on the evidence behind sport and exercise. Awesome. And as funny as that sounds, our children just are not naturally getting the exercise that we evolved to handle. And as Fouad says, we're a little overly domesticated. Nowadays children can't get to school, play in the playground because there's insurance rules against it, or they're sitting in cars and on the bus rather than walking to school. So there's just a lot of evidence behind how helpful exercise can be in terms of developing the brain and also detoxing.
Yeah.
And who else? We're going to have a speakers panel, so clinical pearls, some practitioners who are just going to share with us certain things they're seeing clinically that have been helping. One interesting thing in the States is something called Helminth Therapy, which in very complex cases of immune dysregulation, like autism or chronic fatigue or even Lyme, they're administering what's essentially a green beetle that is an ancient remedy from England that absolutely helps reset the immune system. And so, the thought is that it's part of our ecosystem in the gut that somehow has been damaged. And they're actually seeing pretty interesting results with that. So, it's interesting. There's always new information. It's why we have to do this every year, because there's so much coming out fast and furious. And really what it points to is around the world, we were ecological creatures as we evolved, and we always found solutions in nature. And whether it's England or the Middle East or India or Japan, everyone sort of has their own home remedies, which funnily enough are now resurfacing in science.
Yeah. And isn't it funny, when they test them, a lot of times they're absolutely amazed by the science behind it. And how did these people figure this out? It's amazing.
I mean, one of our big things is really, again, just to let people know that food and nutrition and nutritional medicine is medicine. It's not just prevention. It is absolutely treating pretty serious chronic disease, including autism.
That's awesome. So exciting.
It boggles my mind how people can take a small pill and say, this is going to have a huge impact on my health, and then they can eat like a kilo of food a day and just go, that's it's not
that won't do anything.
Just, it's just calories.
You can always go to the surgeon and get it cut out.
That's right. You can always take another pill to get rid of it.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, for me, even exercise seems like a pill that is actually a replacement for movement in nature and actual, like, just everyday living kind of movement. And it's something that people would never have done. Like, no one would really exercise. People would either play or they would sort of perform activities such as hunting or gathering and or building huts or things like that. Yeah, and there would, like, no one was going to waste energy just doing an activity like exercise. And now, because of the world that we live in, we have to do this as kind of a substitute for natural movement. But there's nothing that beats natural movement in nature. Like, when you have all these elements lined up, you've got sunlight, you've got fresh air of the forest, you've got all the microbiota, like all the bacteria and the fungus and the smells from the essential oils that are being released by the trees and things like that. Like, this is where, like, real healing happens. And I encourage everyone to try to have as much nature time as possible and have natural movement there. But if they can't, like, definitely start looking at those kind of things where at least you're trying to find a substitute for movement in nature, and such as exercise and this kind of small amounts of sun exposure. But, like, if just the amount of happiness and peace that I find in nature, especially since I've been focusing on making a huge part of my life, it's just made a profound impact on me, and I never would have imagined that it would be that huge. So,
Look, it is so true, and I'm so glad that you bring out the point of exercising in nature. I mean, on our Facebook page, which I encourage everyone to visit, because we put daily posts, research and news. We did a couple of weeks back post a research article on how exercising in nature helps alleviate ADHD symptoms in children. So the point it was nature. It wasn't just getting into a gym. So that is a really important point.
Well, I find with my kids, if they're having an anxious, difficult day, just to get them out, go wander around a creek and, explore and swim and splash around. It's like they come back so relaxed and happy, and they say, "Oh, Mum, that helped so much."
Joe, there's studies that talk about like how visual complexity of a natural setting actually adds to brain development.
Wow.
Like even seeing huge amounts of, trees and bark and things like that that you would not see in an artificial environment, that creates a better brain. So, it's really, really important, especially for the developing brain, to be in that kind of environment. There's so much in nature that we really don't even know where to start looking in terms of the health benefits. So, anyway, but so it's really exciting to see that this whole movement's going down that path. Very exciting. Yeah, Leslie, how can people find out a bit more about Mind and the forum that's happening this year?
Okay, well, the best thing to do is just hop on mind.org, mind.org, and you can go under events and you'll see a menu that mentions the forum and practitioner training. And there's also a speaker's reception. Anyone in Sydney is welcome to come that Friday night and meet Dr. Kelly Brogan and our keynote speakers, because we're about education as well as advocacy. So visiting the website's the best way to do it. And on the website, you can also sign up for our newsletter, which goes out weekly, that has a lot of articles. It has articles by pediatricians and nutritionists and naturopaths and soon-to-be chiropractor that just helps families understand some of the solutions out there.
That's good.
Joe, Leslie, would you like to add anything before we finish up here? Is there anything you'd like to add and tell our listeners?
No, I just really want to thank Joe for doing such an amazing job at getting the word out. To have such a huge following is tremendous. And it really just speaks to, human beings. We know what we need. Moms know what we need. And when they hear the truth, they respond to it. So you've really just tapped into a central truth of humanity and parenting that has created a wonderful following. So we appreciate your support. We're trying to bridge the divide with, the moms with intuition and the scientists with knowledge. And, there's a bit of a chasm that we're helping to bridge. So we thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thanks, Fouad, for jumping in. We really look forward to your cooking demo.
Yes.
I'm excited about it. Thank you for inviting me, Leslie.
It'll be great. Well, thank you so much, guys. And Leslie, we're really looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. And I'll post the links to the things that we've talked about. So the Mind website and the Facebook page and anything else that you can think of you want me to share, Leslie, on the website, on the Wellness Couch. And so
thank you.
That's okay. And we'll share the news around as much as we can, because this is something that you guys really don't want to miss out on. If you can possibly get to Sydney, you'll want to come. This is going to be awesome. Will there be...
And there's one other show. I'm just going to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Anyone who is feeling that they don't have time to do, the seminars, there you can go for one day. You can go either Friday or Saturday or Sunday. But there's an expo running all 3 days. You can bring your kids. They're free, and it's $15 entry, and you can get heaps of ideas just by going to the expo.
And probably from talking to the people that have the stalls too.
Exactly, and that's at the Randwick Racecourse.
Okay. Also, is there going to be anything online afterwards for people to watch if they can't come?
So down the road, this is something we're developing for our website. Maybe sort of 3 to 6 months out, we'll be posting some of the lectures, not all of them, but some of them. And probably in the near future, we'll be posting lectures up from last year. And as of next week, we're launching our practitioner search engine, because we've now got 11 years of practitioners who have trained with us, who we feel confident to promote. So, you can hop online and find a practitioner near you. It's always important to do your own research around it as well, but, it's a good point.
It's a good start, yeah, because I get that question a lot on my groups: where can I find a suitable practitioner in my area? So I usually send them to your site.
Oh, good. Thank you.
It's okay. All right. Thank you so much, Leslie, and thank you, Fouad, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.